The sky was never the same after the day the ships came. At first, they appeared as lights above the clouds, silent and beautiful, like falling stars frozen in place. People all over the world stared at them, some with fear, others with hope. News channels spoke of visitors, of peace, of a new future where humanity would no longer be alone in the universe. The leaders of Earth sent messages of welcome. The aliens answered with promises. They said they came to share knowledge. They said they came to guide. But their truth was different. The first days felt like a dream. Alien ships landed in great cities. Towering figures stepped down, their skin shining with colors no human eyes had seen before. Their voices were calm, their movements perfect. They gave gifts of technology. They healed diseases. They offered endless energy. The people cheered, forgetting the warning hidden in history. Power always has a price. Within weeks, the gifts became chains. The technology that promised freedom became the eyes of the masters. Machines floated in the sky, watching every human step. The healers who had cured disease now demanded obedience in return. The endless energy no longer belonged to the people. It fueled the empire that had come to rule. Humanity had signed its own cage, and the bars closed fast. At first, resistance was strong. Soldiers raised weapons, nations fought back. But against the alien empire, no human army lasted long. Their weapons burned with light, their ships moved faster than thought, their machines crushed tanks like toys. The world watched as one city after another fell. Leaders were captured, armies destroyed, hope broken. In less than 1 year, Earth was no longer free. The aliens did not call it slavery. They used softer words, words that made the chains feel lighter. They said it was order. They said it was unity. But the people knew what it truly was. They were forced to build for their masters. They mined the earth, tore down forests, filled ships with treasures that no longer belonged to them. Children grew up not knowing freedom, only command. Every street had watchers. Every home had silence. The world had become a prison, but one without walls. Still, not all hope was gone. Deep beneath the surface, in forgotten tunnels and broken cities, whispers grew. Old books were hidden. Forbidden songs were sung in the dark. Families told stories of a time when humanity was free, of a time when Earth belonged to its people. The aliens believed humanity was broken. They saw bowed heads, silent workers, empty eyes. But what they could not see was the fire still burning inside. The planet itself seemed to mourn. Storms grew wilder, oceans restless, the ground trembling under the weight of alien machines. The aliens laughed at the signs. To them, Earth was only a resource, a stone to be used until empty. But the old ones remembered something different. They said Earth was alive in its own way. They said the planet listened, and when pushed too far, Earth would answer. Years passed under chains. Children became adults in slavery. Yet still, the whispers grew. In the darkness, people shared a single thought. They have taken everything. But one day, they will take too much. The aliens could not hear those words. They thought humanity was finished, weak, defeated. But they did not understand the truth. Humanity had always been strongest when pushed against the edge. And so Earth waited. Humanity waited. The chains grew heavier, the work harder, the pain deeper. But within that pain, something was rising. Something unseen, unstoppable, waiting for the right moment. The aliens believed the world was silent. They believed they had crushed all hope. But Earth was never silent. It was listening. It was watching. And when the time came, it would roar. They thought Earth was theirs to command. But Earth was patient, and patience is a weapon sharper than any blade. The years of slavery stretched like an endless night. Humanity bowed, worked, and obeyed, but inside the silence, something was stirring. The aliens believed they had broken the human spirit, that obedience had become nature, that the fire of freedom was gone. But they were wrong. The fire had not died. It had gone underground, in the tunnels beneath ruined cities, in caves hidden by forests, and in the shadows of mountains. Humans began to gather. They were not armies, not soldiers. just ordinary people with ordinary hearts. But hearts can hold a power stronger than weapons. They whispered stories of the old world, of skies once free, of oceans that belonged to no master. Children listened wide-eyed as elders spoke of battles fought long ago. Every word was forbidden, but every word planted a seed. Those seeds grew into rebellion. At first, it was small. A worker in a mine broke a machine and blamed it on failure. A farmer hid grain instead of sending it all to alien stores. A child carried secret notes between villages. None of these acts could win a war, but each act reminded people that they still had choices, that they were not completely broken. The aliens noticed strange accidents, missing resources, broken machines. They sent patrols to search, but they never found the truth. Humans learned to live in silence, to strike and vanish, to fight without being seen. The aliens mocked them. Weak creatures, they said, they do not dare raise their hands against us. They did not understand that the silence itself was a weapon. The silence taught patience, and patience taught strength. In the caves, hidden groups built small fires, and around those fires they planned. They shared forbidden tools, broken weapons from fallen battles, scraps of alien machines stolen in secret. Slowly, piece by piece, they prepared. Not for tomorrow, not for next year, but for the moment when the world itself would rise with them. The planets seemed to listen. Storms grew more violent each season. Crops failed under alien machines. Strange quakes shook the ground. The aliens thought these were only natural events. They believed nature could not resist them. But the humans whispered a different truth. The earth itself was restless, and it was waiting. One day, they said, Earth will not stay silent. The silent rebellion had no leaders, no armies, no banners. It lived in the hearts of slaves, in the eyes of children, in the hands of mothers and fathers who refused to surrender hope. The aliens could not destroy it, because they could not see it. They ruled the cities, but they did not rule the shadows. They ruled the skies, but they did not rule the whispers. There were sacrifices. Whole villages vanished when rebels were discovered. Families were torn apart. Children were taken as punishment. Yet even in pain, the rebellion grew stronger. Every loss became a story. Every death became a spark. Humanity learned a cruel truth. When freedom is taken, even pain becomes a weapon. One night, deep in the ruins of a forgotten city, a group of rebels gathered around a small fire. Their clothes were torn, their faces pale, but their eyes burned. They spoke of a dream that one day the chains would break, not by human hands alone, but by something greater. The aliens have enslaved us, one voice said, but they have also enslaved Earth. They bleed the planet dry. They cut the forests, drain the oceans, poison the air. And Earth feels it. The group fell silent, listening to the wind howl through broken towers. It almost sounded like a voice, deep and angry. For a moment, even the strongest among them shivered. The rebellion was not only about weapons or battles. It was about survival of the spirit. It was about keeping hope alive long enough for Earth itself to join the fight. Humans did not know when that day would come. They did not know how, but they believed. Belief itself became their strength. The aliens looked down on them from their towers, blind to the truth rising below. They saw slaves, but they could not see soldiers in the making. They saw silence, but they could not hear the storm behind it. They saw broken spirits, but they could not feel the fires still burning. Every day, the aliens believed they had won. Every day, humanity proved them wrong. And so, in the silence, the rebellion grew. It had no trumpet, no drum, no marching lines. It was quiet, patient, invisible. But the silence was a mask. Behind it, the fury of humanity waited. And behind humanity, something greater waited still, the wrath of Earth itself. The aliens had no idea that they were not only fighting humans. They were fighting a planet. The masters believed they had conquered. They did not know they had only lit the fuse. The rebellion was the spark. Earth was the fire. The rebellion had been silent for years, hidden in shadows, waiting for a chance. The aliens ruled with iron hands, their ships always in the sky, their patrols always watching. They believed humanity would never rise. But one small spark was enough to change everything. It began in a mining colony where humans were forced to dig deep into the earth for rare stones the aliens needed. The workers were starving, beaten, broken. One man refused to continue. He dropped his tool and stood still. The guards shouted, their weapons glowing, but he did not move. For the first time in years, a slave looked into alien eyes without fear. The guards killed him instantly, his body falling into the dust. But the spark had already been lit. The others in the mine did not return to work. One by one, they stood. The aliens panicked. They fired their weapons, killing dozens, but the rest did not kneel. They fought with bare hands, with stones, with tools, anything they could grab. That mine burned in rebellion. It was crushed within hours, but the story spread faster than the fire itself. Whispers carried it from camp to camp, village to village. One man stood, they said. One man dared. And soon, it was no longer one. In another city, workers refused to march. In a factory, a group of women sabotaged machines. In the fields, farmers poisoned alien supplies. Small sparks of fury spread across the world, and each spark lit another. The aliens tried to hide the truth, but whispers cannot be chained. The rebellion was no longer silent. It was growing louder every day. The aliens answered with terror. They punished whole villages for one act of defiance. They burned towns to ash. They dragged rebels into the streets and executed them as a warning. But warnings only fed the fire. Every act of cruelty became a reason for more resistance. Humanity was no longer afraid of death. Death was everywhere already. What they feared more was endless chains. And when chains became heavier than death, rebellion became stronger than fear. The spark of fury did not belong to soldiers. It belonged to ordinary people who had nothing left to lose. Children carried messages through tunnels. Farmers hid rebels in barns. Old men passed down secret codes. Mothers raised their sons and daughters not to obey, but to resist. The aliens could not crush this because it was not just a rebellion anymore. It was life itself refusing to surrender. And then something strange began to happen. The planet itself seemed to move with the rebellion. When rebels attacked a supply convoy, a sudden storm blinded alien patrols, giving humans time to escape. When a group of workers rose up in the mountains, an earthquake shook the ground, swallowing alien machines. At first, people thought it was luck, but it happened again and again. And slowly, whispers began. Earth is with us. The aliens noticed too. Their scientists measured storms, quakes, floods. They tried to explain it as natural chaos. But deep inside, fear touched even their cold hearts. It was as if the planet itself had turned into an enemy, as if Earth had chosen a side. The spark of fury was no longer only human. It was the fire of a world rising against its chains. In the dark of night, rebels gathered in secret camps. They had no grand weapons, no fleets, no armies. But they had courage, and they had Earth. A leader rose among them, not chosen, but followed because his voice carried truth. He said, "We are not fighting alone. Every storm that strikes, every quake that shakes, every flood that drowns their machines, it is Earth. And Earth has waited too long. We are the hands of the planet's fury." His words spread like fire. For the first time, people believed victory was possible. Not because they were strong, but because they were not alone. The aliens tightened their grip. They hunted harder. They destroyed villages, burned forests, poisoned rivers. But their every act only woke Earth more. The ground split beneath their machines. Lightning struck their towers. Oceans swallowed their ships. The more they bled the world, the more the world bled them in return. And so the rebellion was no longer silent, no longer hidden. It had become a storm. Humanity's spark of fury had joined with Earth's fury, and together they became something unstoppable. The aliens had ruled with power beyond imagination, but they had forgotten the oldest rule: no chain lasts forever. The spark had been lit. The fire was spreading. The question was no longer if rebellion would come. The question was how long the Masters could survive it. The aliens thought they were fighting humans, but now they were fighting Earth. And Earth was waking. The spark of fury had spread across the world, and the aliens could no longer pretend it was only humans resisting. Something far greater had awakened. The planet itself had turned against its masters. At first, the aliens dismissed it as coincidence. A sudden storm here, an earthquake there, floods in places once dry. They called it chance, nothing more. But the truth grew impossible to deny. Every time the rebellion rose, the earth rose with it. When humans fought in the deserts, sandstorms swallowed alien patrols. When rebels struck in forests, wildfires trapped enemy machines. When they gathered by rivers, floods swept the invaders away. It was as if the planet had chosen its side. Humanity whispered, "Earth fights with us." And those whispers became belief, and belief became strength. The aliens began to feel fear, though they did not show it. Their weapons were powerful, their fleets endless, but against the fury of a living world, their machines were fragile. They built towers of steel, but storms ripped them apart. They dug deep into the ground for minerals, but quakes crushed their tunnels. They sailed ships across oceans, but waves rose higher than mountains. The Empire had enslaved billions before, yet never had they faced a world that fought back like this one. In the cities still under alien control, slaves noticed the changes too. The air grew heavier, the skies darker, the storms louder. Children asked their parents why the weather was angry, and the parents answered softly, "Because Earth is awake." The words gave hope. People began to believe their chains were temporary, that nature itself would not let slavery last forever. Hope made them bold. They resisted more openly, trusting the world to shield them. Sometimes it did. Other times, blood stained the streets. But even in loss, faith grew stronger. For the first time, humanity felt they were not only fighting for Earth, but with Earth. The aliens sent scientists to study the strange events. They drilled into mountains, tested the oceans, scanned the skies. They searched for patterns, but the only pattern was defiance. They realized too late that the planet itself had become an enemy they could not defeat. They could conquer people, but how could they conquer storms? They could enslave bodies, but how could they chain the ground itself? Their arrogance had blinded them. They thought Earth was only a rock to control. Now they saw it was something far greater, something alive with rage. Rebels used this fury to strike harder. They learned to fight with the planet. They waited for storms before launching attacks. They hid in caves where quakes sealed them off from enemy pursuit. They struck near rivers when floods were ready to rise. Humanity and Earth moved together, a partnership of survival and wrath. The aliens began to lose ground. Their machines broke faster than they could repair. Their patrols vanished in a forest that refused to obey them. Their great towers crumbled under lightning. One night, in the ruins of a city once ruled by humans, a massive storm struck. Alien soldiers tried to retreat to their ships, but winds ripped the skies apart. Lightning split their weapons, thunder shook the ground, rain drowned the streets. Hidden rebels attacked through the chaos, and for the first time, an alien garrison fell completely. Survivors whispered of the storm that fought like an army. "Earth fought for us," the rebels said, and their words spread across continents. It became not just a story, but a truth everyone believed. The aliens grew desperate. They brought larger machines, greater weapons, whole fleets to crush resistance. But the greater their power, the greater Earth's fury became. Volcanoes that had slept for centuries exploded, covering skies with fire. Rivers overflowed, tearing bridges apart. Ice broke in the north, swallowing bases in frozen seas. The Empire realized it had awakened something it could not control. For humanity, the fight was still deadly, still filled with sacrifice. Many died each day. Villages were destroyed, families torn apart, rebels hunted. Yet despite the suffering, a strange power grew stronger. The belief that Earth was alive, that the planet itself was a warrior in their ranks. And belief made even the weakest slave stand tall. "We are not alone," they said, and those words gave courage. In secret, leaders of the rebellion gathered. They were tired, scarred, but their eyes burned with new fire. They spoke of a truth they had all seen. One said, "We thought we were weak, but Earth is not weak. Earth fights for us." Another said, "The Empire will fall, not only by our hands, but by the wrath of the planet they tried to break." They agreed that humanity must rise alongside Earth, not just as rebels, but as warriors of the world itself. The Empire had believed Earth was silent. Now it was louder than thunder, stronger than fire, more unyielding than stone. For every human who fell, a storm rose. For every city destroyed, a mountain answered. For every scream of pain, the planet roared. Humanity was no longer a broken species. It had become the voice of Earth's fury, and that fury was only beginning. The masters had enslaved a planet. Now the planet itself was their enemy, and there is no empire strong enough to defeat the rage of a world. The Empire had ruled Earth with unshakable power, but now their power was crumbling piece by piece. Every battle they fought against the humans ended not only with blood, but with the wrath of the planet itself. Their machines sank into mud where there had been dry land. Their fortresses cracked as if the Earth itself pushed back against their weight. Their ships fell from the skies when storms rose like soldiers with lightning in their hands. Humanity had always been weak before alien weapons, but now they were stronger because they were no longer fighting alone. They were fighting with Earth. The rebellion spread across continents. Villages once silent now stood armed with stolen weapons. Men and women who had been slaves their entire lives rose with fury in their hearts. The aliens struck back with cruelty. They burned towns, slaughtered families, poisoned rivers. But every act of cruelty only made the planet answer with greater rage. When a city was destroyed, the ground opened and swallowed alien war machines. When forests were burned, storms rolled in and drowned entire armies. The masters believed they could crush resistance with fear, but fear had already died. What lived now was fury. The fall of empires does not happen in a single day. It happens slowly, then all at once. The aliens lost small battles first, thinking they were unimportant. A supply convoy vanished in the desert. A patrol was ambushed in the mountains. A base was swallowed by a flood. They called these accidents, mistakes, miscalculations. But soon, they were losing more than patrols. They were losing cities. They were losing fleets. They were losing the belief that they were untouchable. The humans no longer hid in shadows. They marched into battle with courage sharper than blades. They sang forbidden songs as they fought, their voices echoing louder than the alien machines. Every death gave strength to the living, and every victory gave strength to the world. The greatest battle came in the heart of a once proud human capital. The aliens had built their strongest fortress there, a tower that reached toward the clouds, filled with weapons and soldiers. They believed it could never fall. But the rebels gathered from all corners of the land. Farmers carried stolen rifles. Miners brought explosives. Children carried messages across the ruins. It was not an army of soldiers. It was an army of humanity itself. As they prepared to attack, the skies grew black. Thunder roared, and lightning flashed across the clouds. The rebels cheered because they knew Earth was with them. When the first shot was fired, the storm answered with a strike of fire that split the alien fortress in two. The battle raged for hours, humans against machines, flesh against steel, but the storm never left. By dawn, the fortress was nothing but ruins, and the rebels stood victorious. The fall of the fortress was more than a victory. It was a message. The empire could be broken. The news spread across the world faster than any ship could travel. Slaves heard of the fall and rose in their own cities. Armies of rebels multiplied, striking faster and stronger than before. The aliens could not hold their control. They called for reinforcements from across the galaxy, but even those fleets met destruction when they entered Earth's skies. The planet shook them from the air, storms ripping them apart before they could land. The empire was vast, powerful, eternal, or so they had believed. But even the greatest empire falls when its foundation is shattered, and Earth itself was tearing at that foundation. For humans, victory came with a price. Thousands died in every battle. Families were torn apart, children lost, villages erased from maps. Yet still they fought because now there was no turning back. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was within reach, and humanity would rather die fighting for it than live forever in chains. They had been slaves, but now they were soldiers of Earth, and their war cry was not only human. It was the voice of the planet roaring through them. The aliens grew desperate. They ordered mass destruction, threatening to burn the entire world if they could not rule it. But this was their final mistake. They had awakened a force beyond their control, and when they tried to break it completely, Earth answered with its full fury. Volcanoes erupted in chains across continents. Oceans rose higher than ever before. Mountains shook with endless quakes. It was not only humanity fighting now. It was the planet itself declaring war. The Empire's fleets were torn apart, their fortresses drowned, their armies swallowed by the ground. The galaxy had never seen such destruction. This was not rebellion. This was extinction-level vengeance. In the ashes of battle, humanity stood scarred but unbroken. The chains that had bound them were gone, melted in fire and storm. The aliens who once believed themselves gods now fled in terror, their empires collapsing beyond Earth as news spread of their defeat. For the first time in history, humanity had not only survived, it had won. And the fall of the Empire was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater. Earth had shown its fury. Humanity had proven its strength. Together, they had ended the rule of their masters. Together, they had written the fall of empires. The fall of the Empire's fortresses shook the galaxy, but it was not the end. The aliens were wounded, humiliated, but not yet destroyed. They had ruled countless worlds, and they were not ready to lose Earth. From the black skies above came their final answer. Entire fleets darkened the heavens, more ships than humanity had ever seen before. They covered the stars like a swarm, armed with weapons that could split mountains and burn oceans. This was not conquest anymore. This was extermination. The aliens had decided that if Earth could not be enslaved, it would be erased. Humanity knew what was coming, and yet no one ran. There was no safe place left. The only choice was to fight. Across the broken cities and burning lands, rebels prepared for the end. Fathers sharpened stolen blades. Mothers loaded weapons. Children carried water and messages. No one was untouched by the war. They all knew the battle ahead would decide everything. If they fell, Earth would fall with them. If they stood, there was still a chance for freedom. The fleets began their assault with fire that tore across the skies. Cities turned to glass, forests to ash, oceans boiled under the heat of alien weapons. Humanity fought back with whatever it had, guns taken from dead soldiers, machines built in secret, fire and stone and blood. But this time, the battle was beyond human strength. Entire armies of rebels were crushed in hours. Villages that had survived years of war vanished in moments. Hope flickered like a candle in a storm. Yet even in that storm, the rebels did not surrender. They screamed their defiance, even as the skies burned above them. And then Earth itself rose with them once more. The ground split in furious quakes that swallowed entire regiments. Waves as tall as towers struck the alien fleets. Storms filled with endless lightning blinded the skies. But the fleets were endless, their weapons relentless, their hatred complete. The war was no longer rebellion. It was survival. Humanity stood in its last stand, knowing every breath could be the final one. In the ruins of what was once a great city, a massive battle raged. Thousands of rebels gathered there, not because it was safe, but because it was the heart of their world. They knew if the aliens controlled it, Earth would be lost. Men, women, and children fought together as equals. The skies were fire, the ground was blood, but still they fought. Leaders raised their voices above the chaos, shouting that Earth was alive, that Earth would never fall. And the planet answered them. As alien towers fired into the crowds, the ground shook and those towers collapsed. As fleets unleashed their weapons from above, lightning struck them one after another. Every moment of despair was met with an echo of defiance. Still, the cost was unbearable. Friends fell beside friends. Families were torn apart. Leaders died with weapons still in their hands. Yet even in death, the fight did not stop. Each fallen human gave courage to the living. Each scream of pain became a roar of fury. Humanity refused to kneel, even when the world around them burned. They fought not as soldiers of flesh alone, but as voices of Earth's rage. The aliens realized with horror that they were not fighting just a people or even just a planet. They were fighting something far greater, an alliance between a species and its world. No empire had ever faced such a force before. No empire had ever feared slaves. But now they feared. The more they attacked, the stronger Earth struck back. The more they burned, the more the planet roared. The last stand was no longer a defense. It was a storm of vengeance. In the middle of that storm, a voice rose above the chaos. It was not the voice of a king or a general, but of a rebel scarred by battle and loss. He shouted to all who could hear, "We are the children of Earth, and Earth will never bow." His words spread like fire across the battlefield. Humans who were close to death stood again. Rebels who were ready to give up found new strength. And Earth itself seemed to echo the words with thunder and fire. The battle turned. The fleets above tried to unleash their final strike, weapons designed to break entire planets. But the planet they had enslaved for so long was not a stone waiting to be shattered. It was alive. As they fired, the skies broke apart with storms beyond imagination. Lightning struck in endless waves, tearing through ship after ship. Quakes split the ground, swallowing entire alien armies. Volcanoes erupted, filling the skies with fire that reached even the stars. The aliens had brought everything to end Earth, but Earth brought everything to end them. By the time the sun rose over the battlefield, the ground was covered in ash and ruin. The fleets were broken, their survivors fleeing in terror. Humanity stood bloodied and scarred, but still standing. This was not a clean victory. It was survival bought with everything they had. But in that survival was triumph. Humanity had stood against extinction, and it had not fallen. The last stand had not been the end. It had been the turning point. The aliens were broken, their empire shaken. For the first time, humanity was not prey. For the first time, Earth itself had shown its full power. And the galaxy would never forget what it had seen. Humanity had survived its last stand, and now the war was no longer about survival. Now it was about revenge. The last stand had ended with fire, storm, and blood, but humanity still stood. The alien fleets were broken, their armies scattered, their power shattered. Yet the masters of the Empire were not finished. Far beyond Earth, in the cold black of space, the rulers of the galaxies gathered. They swore that Earth would not survive. They called humanity dangerous, cursed the planet as cursed soil, and prepared to erase both forever. They unleashed their greatest weapons, fleets larger than anything seen before, machines built to crush worlds, engines of destruction that had consumed countless civilizations. They came not to conquer this time, but to destroy. For them, Earth was no longer a jewel to enslave, but a threat to eliminate. And when they came, the skies above Earth turned black again, filled with endless shapes of war. But humanity was not the same as before. They had fought, bled, and survived. They were no longer slaves. They were no longer broken. They were warriors who had stood beside their planet and lived. They looked to the black sky and did not bow. They raised their voices as one and shouted to the heavens, "Come then. We are ready." The battle that followed was not like the others. It was not rebellion. It was not resistance. It was revenge. Earth itself rose in fury. The skies split apart with storms that burned brighter than fire. Lightning tore through the alien fleets, storm after storm, until the stars themselves seemed to vanish. The oceans rose like titans, swallowing ships whole. Mountains shook until they shattered, sending fire and stone into the skies. Volcanoes roared in endless fury, pouring rivers of flame across the land. The planet was alive with rage, and that rage was not only for itself, but for the billions of humans who had suffered under chains. Humanity fought alongside it with everything they had. They climbed into the ruins of alien machines, turning their weapons against the invaders. They fired from rooftops, from mountains, from deserts. They charged into the enemy with blades, with fire, with bare hands, if nothing else remained. Every act was defiance, every breath a roar of vengeance. The Empire's fleets unleashed their most terrible weapons, beams of light that could melt stone, fire that could burn seas. But Earth answered every strike. Where they fired, storms struck them down. Where they landed, quakes tore the ground apart. Where they tried to dig in, the mountains themselves crushed them. The aliens screamed in fear. For the first time in all their history, they were not gods but prey. They had ruled countless worlds, but never had they faced a world that refused to die. The war raged for days, then weeks, then months. Humanity lost many, but their courage never faded. Children carried food to fighters. Mothers held weapons in their hands. Fathers fought until their last breath. The people were no longer fighting just to survive. They were fighting to erase the empire that had enslaved them, to make sure no chain ever touched their children again. Earth roared with them, louder each day, until the galaxy itself seemed to tremble. And then came the final blow. The Empire gathered what remained of its fleets for one last strike, a weapon so powerful it could shatter a planet. They aimed it at Earth, desperate to end what they could not control. But before they could fire, the ground beneath them split, and the skies exploded with storms unlike any ever seen. Lightning fell like endless fire. Winds tore ships apart. Volcanoes erupted in chains across the continents. Earth had been patient, but now patience was gone. The planet unleashed everything at once, an extinction-level fury that no empire could withstand. The great weapon of the aliens never fired. Their fleets were consumed in storms, swallowed by seas, broken by mountains, burned by fire. In one single night, the empire that had ruled countless worlds for thousands of years was gone. When the skies cleared, silence fell. The oceans were calm again, the storms quiet, the mountains still. Humanity stood on the ashes of a broken world, scarred and weary, but free. They had lost much, more than words could hold, but what they had gained was greater. They had defeated the masters of galaxies. They had destroyed an empire that had believed itself eternal. They had proven that no chain could last forever, not when Earth itself fought beside its children. Humanity looked at their planet with new eyes. It was not only their home. It was their protector, their ally, their warrior, and they had become its voice. The galaxy heard the story. Other enslaved worlds whispered the name of Earth with hope. The empire was gone, its power shattered, its fear spreading across the stars. For the first time, humanity was not seen as weak or small. They were seen as the children of a world that had chosen to fight. And that truth would never be forgotten. In the end, Earth was silent again, but it was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a warrior resting after victory. Humanity stood upon that silence and remembered every life lost, every chain broken, every storm that had saved them. They knew the price of freedom, and they swore never to forget it. The aliens had thought Earth was weak. They had thought humans were nothing. But they had been wrong. Earth had waited. Humanity had endured. And together, they had unleashed extinction-level revenge.